Uvaŋa atiġa Asiqłuq. Hi. We have no word for hello or goodbye. I said Knicketpitch is how are y'all? Did I say that right, y'all? Uvula lotak is good day. Uvaŋa atiġa Asiqłuq. My Iñupiaq name is Asiqłuq, and it means bad boy. I wasn't named because I was a bad boy. I was named after one of my great uncles. My grandmother gave me my name. So if elders ask me my Iñupiaq name, they'll know my family tree just by that. My white fox name is Sean Topkok. I'm going to be sharing with you some stories, my personal stories about being a Iñupiaq, some past, present, and future stories, and how it's really important to Indigenous knowledge systems. Now, I'm Iñupiaq. I'm also Sámi, Irish, and Norwegian. Sámi people are the indigenous people in Scandinavia. When I was growing up, being of mixed heritages, I didn't quite fit in anywhere. I was bullied by my classmates for being native. I was shunned by my relatives for being white. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And there's even one point where, as a youth, I was probably about 10 years old, I tried to commit suicide. It's tough to talk about. But if we want our youth to be able to survive and to help them, we must share our stories. So my father was an alcoholic. My brothers were emotionally and physically abusive, and I had cultural confusion. So I tried to poison myself. Unsuccessfully, of course, and I'm happy to be here. Years later, in my early adulthood, I began working at a summer camp. And at the summer camp, it's for the native urban youth. There, we were teaching the urban youth native arts and crafts, talking about the different cultures. And I want to share with you the different cultures that we have here in Alaska. I'm Iñupiaq, which is the light blue area up there. And there's about 20 different Alaskan native groups, and each one of them speak a unique language. So there's not just Eskimos up in Alaska. We also started learning how to dance. And there's 2 elders that were teaching us how to dance at the summer camp. And I was learning along with the children, with the campers, learning how to dance, because I didn't know about it when I was growing up. So after we're done dancing, one of the elders said, okay, he announced to everybody, Sean made a mistake. You all have to dance it all over again. I thought the elders were picking on me, but actually they saw something in me. They saw something that, a potential for making sure that I learned these things correctly so that I could teach other people how to do it properly. So we had to do it over and over again until I knew how to do all of the dances. These elders adopted me and nurtured me and started my journey to becoming more knowledgeable about my cultural heritages, started to make me like myself more for who I am. Right now, I work for the Alaska Native Knowledge Network at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Alaska Native Knowledge Network, what we try to do is we work with elders, community members, and educators, and we bring in the native ways of knowing and teaching. We were originally funded by the National Science Foundation and Annenberg Rural Challenge, and so we had to do reports to them yearly. So what we did was we looked at the math and science scores of the schools that throughout all of Alaska. And with the schools that we work closely together with that were incorporating native ways of knowing, we saw the science and math scores going up significantly. And with the other school districts, they remained about the same. So bringing the native ways of knowing was working. And it's really important for all educators and all children in Alaska. Now, when you think about indigenous knowledge, you think of it like an iceberg analogy. The top of the iceberg is just the 10% of what you see above the surface. That's just like the culture. When you're introduced to a culture, the first things that you see is our drumming, our fine arts, our some games, storytelling, and our regalia. We prefer to call this regalia. We don't call them costumes. Costumes are usually for Halloween. So below the surface is the deep-rooted knowledge. There's navigational skills, there's food preservation, there's waste disposal, fire and heating, and medical knowledge. Now I want to share with you something that happened to me about 15 years ago. I used to get these cluster migraines. I still get them every once in a while. And if you're not familiar with cluster migraines, they come on all of a sudden. They stick around for about 5 minutes, really painful headache, and then they gradually go away. And it was bearable for a little while that I was able to handle it. But after a certain amount of time, they started becoming more frequent, coming more back-to-back and more intense, where sometimes when a headache came on, I was curled up in a fetal position on the floor until it went away. And I used to get about 30 to 40 attacks a day. So I went to a neurologist, and the neurologist tried to prescribe, we tried these remedies like Depakote, Emertrex shots, oxygen, caffeine pills. None of it seemed to work. I talked to an elder about my cluster migraines, and she suggested spruce water. And so she taught me how to look for the spruce trees, not too old, not too young, taught me to respect the tree, to let it know that we're going to use it for medicine and not for personal gain. There's no pharmaceutical companies out there. And so I cut off a bough or a branch, I'll boil it up, and then I tried the spruce tea, a cup of spruce tea a day. And after 3 days, my headaches went away. Saved my life. So this deep-rooted knowledge is, the elders have this deep-rooted knowledge that they need to share with the youth. These are things that have been passed down through the generations. With the Iñupiaq people, we've been in Alaska for over 8,000 years, so that cultural knowledge, the knowledge about the place, is really embedded in our stories. They're passed down through our stories. There's two different types of stories that Iñupiaq people have. We have the legend stories. We call them Iñupiaq. And there is one legend story called Kayak. He was a magical traveler. And Kayak, when he was born, he actually had several brothers that went away and went out hunting that never returned. And so when he was born, his father and mother knew that he was going to go out looking for his brothers. So his father wanted to prepare him for his journey. First, when he was an infant, the father would take a twig or a little stick and slightly hit him as an infant until he would eventually flinch or avoid getting hit. Later on, when he was a toddler, the father would go up on the sod house, and then he would go up to the smoke hole, and he'd take a bow and aim for the baby while he was sleeping. And when the arrow left, Kayak moved away instinctively. He was teaching him how to avoid danger. And his father came from the eastern mountains, and he was just a regular person. Then there's his mother, who was an Iñupiaq, is a shaman, and she came from the western mountains. Before his journey, she gave him some Asiqłuq, is Eskimo ice cream, magical Eskimo ice cream, for him to bring with him and eat little bits and when he had all these different adventures, and told him in times of need, just eat a little bit and take this magic with you. So some of these stories, these legend stories, old stories, they share with you that you need to learn your experiences, your life experiences, but also bring with you the spirituality and knowledge from your ancestors. So that's the Iñupiaq, is the legend stories. We also have personal stories. We call those uqatuat. Some of the personal stories include there's a couple of men who are hunters, and they're in a whiteout condition. And if you don't know what a whiteout condition is, well, the East Coast people probably know what whiteout conditions are. But I wish we had more snow up in Alaska. But whiteout conditions is lots of snow coming down, lots of snow, and the wind is blowing, and you can't see anything in front of you except for white. And this was a long time ago. 2 hunters were out, and so they decided to tether themselves off, and then they went to try to find their old camp. And so when they're walking, they would slip and fall. They're tethered, so they made sure that they stuck together because they'd be able to survive better that way. And then they came to a river. They knew at the river they had to keep following it. They knew where their camp was near the river. And they knew to keep on going. Otherwise, if they were to stay there, they had to take a stick with them if they were to bury themselves in the snow to wait out the storm. Take the stick, poke holes so you don't suffocate in the snow. But they wanted to continue on until they reached willows, and they knew that their camp was near these, where the only set of willows were, and they were able to survive. So these are survival stories, personal stories that were passed down. We also have our stories that are passed down through dances. Dances is another way of passing, of telling a story. There's William McQuilloch and Johnny Kakark. Asiqłuq that was my great uncle that I was named after. They're both writers, and they're also dance leaders. And they wrote about our dances being passed down by the spirit people. They also wrote down that if we don't continue our dances, we are going to lose our culture. So we try to learn our dances through the generations, but our elders also encourage us to learn dances, to make up dances so that we could teach it to our youth. So about 19 years ago, I created a dance called The Fox and the Raven. And this is an old story that's been passed down. And this is my oldest son when he was 10 years old. And I have 3 sons and a grandson. But the story goes, there's the fox, and he's a trickster. And then there's the raven, who's a trickster. And they've never tricked each other before. And the fox suggested they go up a hill and slide down the hill. At the bottom of the hill is a big, huge mud puddle. Now, when I was growing up, I had cultural confusion. I didn't have that knowledge about dancing. So when my children, they were dancing ever since infancy. And so they're proud of who they are. And that's what I'm really happy about, bringing this knowledge to them. So the end of the story is that the raven goes, he flies, slides down the hill and jumps as high as he can and flies over the mud puddle. The fox tries to slide down, he jumps as high as he could and lands in the middle of the mud puddle. And so that's why you don't see the fox and raven playing together anymore. Before my first son was born, I wanted all of my sons to be proud of who they are, to avoid any kind of cultural confusion. And I come from a mixed heritage, like I said before. My wife is all Iñupiaq, but she taught me Norwegian. So we speak Norwegian at home, because that's part of my cultural heritage. We listen to Celtic music. And today, my oldest son teaches Iñupiaq dancing to the youth. So I'm very proud to say that he's happy who he is. Think about your own personal happiness, your own identity. Look above the surface. Celebrate your dances, celebrate your attire, because above the surface it shows you how to love who you are. Now, below the surface, the deep-rooted knowledge is how to understand who you are. Go to your elders and find out their stories. How did they come to America? What is your family tree? What is part of your cultural heritages? Learn who you are and celebrate that. Also share your cultural heritages. You'll be able to learn more about who you are and be able to learn from other cultural groups. In my Iñupiaq language, I want to say Iñupiaq, that means thank you very much. And akumi means end of story. Iñupiaq, thank you.